Here's the Trilateral Commission at 25. This is interesting. This is, I think, 1998, their 25th anniversary. And this is just interesting to see, so you can see some real faces behind, behind the names and just behind the organization. You won't know who the two on the left are, the lady, the Japanese lady, and the tall gentleman standing with the bow tie on the left. And by the way, they're all congratulating each other with rewards and plaques and who knows what else. They probably couldn't get anybody else to give them a lot of awards, so they gave themselves awards. But the three people on the right, you have a better chance of recognizing. The first person that you would point to, and I'm just going to put a highlighter on this, the first person that you could point to, that highlighter doesn't work because it's the wrong color. I'll try this one here. This person here, of course, is David Rockefeller. And he's getting up in years, as you can tell. He's 10 years older now. And he's still kicking. He's still out there, still around. He's still the chairman of the Trilateral Commission, a very, very influential person. This person here you might recognize is Zbigniew Brzezinski. He's now in his late 70s, and he's still very active as well. Brzezinski was the the head foreign policy advisor for Barack Obama during his run for presidency. And Brzezinski could well show up again in an administrative post within Barack's administration. This person here is a little bit less familiar to you. He's a giant of a man, by the way. You can see how he towers over David Rockefeller, and Brzezinski's not a short man either. But this is Paul Volcker, who was of course, the Fed chairman under Jimmy Carter. And we won't talk a lot about Paul Volcker. A lot could be said about him, but this man has made a lot of trouble over the years for our economy. So here you have, this is just the party that was going on, and you can see, get going here again, get my, there we go, get my selector back. All the names at the bottom here now. Peter Sutherland on the left is from Europe. He's a mucky-muck in the European Union. Staccato Ogata is from Japan, and she's a very powerful woman in the Japanese, in the Asian area. Now, skipping gears just a little bit, if you don't know who this man is, you need to know who he is. This is Robert A. Pastor, Professor and Dr. Robert A. Pastor. He's so far been given the ignominious title of being the father of the North American Union, or the North American community, which of course hasn't been created yet. Doesn't mean they don't want to, but this man has been pushing for many years. He's the man behind the Security and Prosperity Partnership. He's written more about the North American community than any other scholar alive. He's kind of always kind of a latter-day version of a Zbigniew Brzezinski, if I might use that, drop that name in here. He's not a member of the Trilateral Commission, by the way, but he was a protege of Zbigniew Brzezinski back in the 70s. It's absolutely amazing story to go back and look at some of these things. Robert Pastor was executive director of the Lenowitz Commission. Some of you have no clue what the Lenowitz Commission was or what I'm talking about, but just follow along with me for just a minute. 7 out of 8 members of the Trilateral of the Lenowitz Commission were members of the Trilateral Commission. 7 out of 8. It was chaired, by the way, by Saul Lenowitz, who was chairman of one of the large global banks at the time. And this committee was the committee that wrote the policy to cede the Panama Canal to Panama. Sovereign U.S. property given away without the will of the people or even the will of the Senate. It was negotiated away by Jimmy Carter, a member of the Trilateral Commission, and by this heavily stacked commission that was stacked with members of the Trilateral Commission. And the person whose fingers were on the typewriter to actually write out the policy was Dr. Robert A. Pastor. This was the biggest loss to national security that the United States suffered in the 1900s, absolutely, without question. Now, Robert Pastor has not gone away. He wrote recently that about this kind of a historical statement, Europeans facing the crisis of 2 world wars turned to the European community as a means to prevent war and advance their economic interests. This was a true statement as far as they were concerned. This was exactly it. But I would want to make a note and add to this that the current European Constitution was written in 2002 by Valéry Giscard d'Estaing, and he is a member of the Trilateral Commission. In David Rockefeller's memoirs, which he wrote a few years ago, he actually gave credit to the early creation of the European Union to members of the Trilateral Commission back in the early 1970s, and that is a fact that they were involved and they were pushing the envelope to establish a precedent on how a union could be created like this. And by the way, they're using that same blueprint on America today, thanks to Robert A. Pastor and thanks to members of the Trilateral Commission today. Now, what Pastor says is that a crisis is needed to kickstart the North American community. And I don't want to pick on the North American community in particular. This is just a good example of crisis management, period. But this is the mindset. This is what Pastor said to a Spanish newspaper in an interview in December 2006. It was translated from Spanish into English. He said, "A crisis is an event which can force democratic governments to make difficult decisions, like those that will be required to create a North American community. It's not that I want another 9/11 crisis, but having a crisis would force decisions that otherwise might not get made." Now, the key here is that a crisis, whatever crisis, would force decisions that would otherwise not get made. Can you think for a minute about a certain $700 billion bailout that was just ramrodded through by Treasury Secretary Paulson and Federal Reserve Chairman Bernanke? I think you probably can. Without the crisis, those decisions would never have been made in a thousand blue moons. But because of the crisis, we were forced into position to accept proposals that were beyond our control and seemingly were the only answer to our problems. Of course, in that case, it wasn't the answer to our problem at all. They're still coming back to the trough now that the trough has been filled with water, looking for more. So, you pick a crisis. Any crisis will do. How about a currency collapse? We haven't had that quite yet. How about a stock market collapse? That would be a good one. How about a housing collapse? Yeah, that's pretty familiar to a lot of us. How about a credit market collapse? Yep, had that too. How about U.S. insolvency? Nobody's declared, our government has not declared insolvency yet, but that would be a very interesting crisis if the government one day says that they cannot service the interest on the national debt anymore. How about a U.S. terrorist attack? Well, that hasn't happened for a while, but that would be a good crisis. That would be a manageable entity. Well, lastly, just for kicks, I'd say, how about global warming? Of course, Al Gore, we're all going to die, Gore, was a member of the Trilateral Commission. And all of these crises that are put before us, any one of which, would work just fine, to bring proposals to the table that we would be forced to accept. In other conditions, we would send them packing, maybe even run them out on a rail with tar and feathers. So when a crisis does hit, and we have crises all around us right now, bombs bursting in air, if you will, crises are everywhere around us. They seem to be overwhelming us. But let me tell you something. When the crisis hits, don't watch the crisis, watch the enemy, because they will use the crisis to shove things down our throat, our national throat, that we would not accept in 10,000 years under any other circumstances. These people, these perpetrators of the new international economic order, are experts at using a crisis to advance their cause. They've had control of the executive branch of our country since 1976, and basically they're doing anything they want to do with our country, with our economy, with our political system, and so on.